Hello, this is Skak. I'm the creator of Ashes.live, and I am here to describe to you a way in which you can visually resolve card effects in Ashes: Rise of the Phoenixborn by Plaid Hat Games on the table, because resolving effects in Ashes is very complicated, and a lot of people have trouble with it. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. Here we have a game of Ashes that is going underway. We've got two opponents, one playing Brandon on this side and another playing Odette on this side. So we've got, here we've got Geralmine, the stuffed bear, and Sir Snugglesworth, the Zergling. So this is, these two are not the best Ashes players. Their decks are pretty strange, probably because they have stuffing for brains, but thankfully they have here a very complicated setup for us, and I apologize for the shiny nature of my cards. I like to sleeve them in glossy sleeves because I hate my opponent. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. As you can see, Sir Snugglesworth is our current first player. They have the first player token, and it's actually their turn. So, Sir Snugglesworth decides to play the card Meteor, one of my absolute favorites when it comes to describing card effects. So, for any card, you first pay the effects, declare your targets, and then resolve them. In Meteor's case, the cost is 2 Divine Power die. So, those go in the exhausted pool. There's actually no targeting on Meteor, as you can see. It just affects all units equally. And now this method for resolving, figuring out effect resolution relies on you placing your cards to the side of the table. Because I don't hate myself and I don't want to be reaching too far, I'm actually going to put it in the middle right here. So, here is the start of our effect resolution. It's not really a chain, maybe more of a matrix. So we start resolving Meteor, and we go top to bottom. It says deal 2 damage to all units. Okay, so now one of the tricks that I like to do is, instead of putting the damage directly on the units, especially for something like Meteor where you're going to be resolving it one at a time, I like to deal the damage to the table. So we'll put 2 damage in front of every single unit, and at this point damage has been dealt, but no damage has been received, because receiving damage occurs during the damage and destruction resolution process. So as a result of this, it is not yet time to trigger the abilities of either the Leech Warrior or the Living Doll, because both of these cards trigger on receives damage, and right now it's just been dealt. In any case, now all of the damage has been dealt. The FAQ states that for a card that both deals damage and has some other immediate effect, you resolve all immediate effects before you start the damage and destruction resolution process. So all of this damage is just going to chill here for, as you're about to see, quite a long time. Our next step in Meteor is, for each unit, place 1 exhaustion token on the unit unless its controller spends 1 basic. So, it's currently Sir Snugglesworth's turn. He decides to pay a basic to keep his Anchornaut unexhausted. And he then decides that he is not going to pay a basic to prevent the Emperor Lion from being exhausted, because the Emperor Lion has the card Devotion attached to it. Devotion is an alteration which states, when 1 or more exhaustion tokens are placed on this unit by the effect of a spell, ability, or dice power, you may move 1 of those exhaustion tokens onto this spell. So, this is being resolved in response to Meteor. This is called a triggered effect. Triggered effects do not resolve until the effect that triggered them has fully resolved. So in this case, we place Devotion immediately to the right of Meteor, signifying that it is resolving as a result of one of these effects. To remind ourselves what we're doing, I'm going to place an exhaustion token right next to the card. This indicates that when this card resolves, that exhaustion token is placed. Okay, so Sir Snugglesworth has done his exhaustion effects. Now we need to do the exhaustion effects over here. At this point, excuse me if this was left over from my test, we don't pay for the Butterfly Monk. It gets exhausted. So just pretend that wasn't there before. However, Geralmine over here says I actually do want to pay for both my Leech Warrior and my Living Doll, because I do not want them to be exhausted. So we take 2 basics, they go into the pool. Alrighty. Next up, now we have completely resolved the exhaustion effect. Oh, wait, excuse me. I misplayed that. So, for one of these, yes, Geraldine is going to place this one for, say, the living doll. For the other, Geraldine decides to use this charm power die because Geraldine has a spellboard card called Royal Charm. After you spend a charm or divine power symbol, you may place one exhaustion token on this spell to place that die with that symbol onto a target unit you control. So, as ever, we pay the cost. That means we place an exhaustion token on Royal Charm. We declare our target. Our target is going to be the Leech Warrior, and we resolve its effects. However, these effects are resolving in response to something that happened on Meteor. That means that we put it to the right of Meteor. And because both of these cards are responding to the exact same thing, they're responding simultaneously, we put them slightly overlapping to remind ourselves that we need to resolve them simultaneously, quote-unquote. In other words, we resolve them in the order of the person who's turned the active player. In this case, that would be Sir Snugglesworth, because he is not only the first player, but it's also his turn. Okay, so we've triggered Royal Charm. Now that means that we're going to place this die. This die is technically in the exhausted pool, the exhausted dice pool, but we're going to stick it right here next to Leech Warrior as a visual reminder that once Royal Charm resolves, that's where the die is going to go. Okay, at which point we've fully resolved Meteor's immediate effects, and now it is time to move on to resolving damage. Because once again, we can't move on to this stuff until this card is fully resolved, which means all of these damage tokens need to be placed on their units. So, again, Sir Snugglesworth says to us, he wants to resolve the damage on, say, Anchornaut first. Now, Anchornaut is a horrible, horrible card, because it is basically the exception for all timing rolls. Typically, you cannot use a card ability unless it is in response to something that's triggering it. Anchornaut, however, you can use any time during your turn. So we start the damage and resolution process for Anchornaut. We're going to stick him right up there and stick those tokens up. So, when you're using the matrix to resolve card effects, as I already mentioned, you resolve effects from left to right. You also resolve effects from top to bottom. So in this case, Anchornaut's damage resolution is it's part of the Meteor, but it's basically resolving right now, so we put it above to remind ourselves that this is what's currently happening. Now, during the damage and resolution process, first damage is received, and then it is placed on the unit, and the unit might be destroyed or something. In this case, because Anchornaut is a nasty little bugger, Sir Snugglesworth decides that he's going to use Anchornaut's ability after the damage is received. So Anchornaut's ability says, during your turn, you may place one exhaustion token on this unit to deal 1 damage to a target unit. So, pay our cost, and we're actually going to move these tokens down beneath it, just as a visual reminder that that is currently what happens next. We pay our cost, we declare our target. Anchornaut is going to deal 1 damage to the Leech Warrior. So, again, it's dealt to the table. Now, at this point, we've resolved his effect. It's now time to resolve the damage on the Leech Warrior, because the damage and destruction resolution process can be interrupted by any damage and destruction resolution process that is initiated during that DDR process. So, in this case, this takes precedence over the Anchornaut's damage and destruction because this was triggered during his destruction process. So, once more, we shuffle our cards around a little bit. Our Leech Warrior is receiving 1 damage. Now, Leech Warrior, after he receives damage, if I could get this to focus, his controller, Geraldine, selects 1 die in a target player's active pool and moves it into that player's exhausted pool. In this case, she decides to move this die over. Alright, that has fully resolved. The Leech Warrior receives damage. It is not destroyed, so it goes back where it belonged, where it was initially. We've resolved the Anchornaut's effect. We are now resolving the Anchornaut's damage. He's already received it. The damage is dealt. And the Anchornaut is destroyed. However, Sir Snugglesworth has lots of tricks up his sleeve. He decides to trigger Chant of Revenge. Whenever a unit you control is destroyed, you may place one exhaustion token on this spell to deal 1 damage to a target unit or Phoenixborn. In this case, we play our cost, we declare our target. We're going to deal a damage to Brennan. So, it is now time to resolve Brennan's damage. Here goes Brennan. He is receiving damage. Fortunately, Geraldine has a trick up her sleeve. A trick known as Sympathy Pain. It's a reaction spell. Play the spell after your Phoenixborn has received damage. Deal 3 damage to a target unit or Phoenixborn. So, she pays the cost for the card. Exhausted pool. Declare our targets. Geraldine, who do you want to target? I think maybe Geraldine wants to target Odette. So, there's 3 damage. Oh, not 4. There's 3 damage to Odette. Now, this is actually going to be going up above Brennan. It's damage. So, let me see if I'm forgetting anything here. As you can see, this matrix can get really out of hand. Most of the time, I actually wouldn't recommend that you play with this on the table like this, but especially for a really complicated setup like this, where we've got multiple things going on all at once, it can be really handy for you to be able to visualize, okay, exactly what's going on. Sorry, lost my train of thought. Let me just verify what we've got over here so I don't forget anything. Yeah, okay. This is a good time for it. So, Sympathy Pain, again, has interrupted the damage and destruction process. So, now it's Odette's turn. I don't have room up there, so I'm just going to put Odette down here for now. Odette gets 3 tokens. Odette has received damage, thus triggering Guilt Link. Whenever your Phoenixborn receives 1 or more damage, you may place 1 exhaustion token on this spell to place a wound token on target unit or Phoenixborn. So, we're looping around here from the bottom of the board. Pay our cost. Declare our target. I am going to place a wound token on Brennan Blackcloud. However, in order to prevent this effect, Geraldine can, if I could get this to focus, discard a a ready spell or a unit they control. And they decide to do that. So Geraldine says, alright, well that's all fine and dandy. I am going to discard my Butterfly Monk. So, when the Butterfly Monk is... well, let's see. I didn't actually think this one through all the way, because this is a discard. This says when the Butterfly Monk is destroyed. So in this case, I believe the Butterfly Monk's ability doesn't trigger. I'll have to check up on that one, but I'm fairly certain that because this triggers on destruction, and we haven't actually entered a damage and destruction resolution process, the Butterfly Monk doesn't get to heal any damage, which is too bad, but them's the breaks. So, we've canceled that damage, which we can remove from the table. Guilt Link has fully resolved. The damage has been received, now it's placed. No destruction happens, no other responses. Damage is fully resolved. We move back. Alright, now, Sympathy Pain has been resolved. It goes in the discard. And we're back to the damage on Brennan, which has been received, dealt, no destruction. Damage is resolved. We can move Brennan back to his home. Her home, however you want to refer to her. I always refer to Brennan as a him, simply because as I understood it, while biologically female, he considers himself male. But I hear a lot of people saying her, who are more in the know, so who knows. In any case, that doesn't actually matter at all. So, we move on. Chant of Revenge has been resolved, because that was the damage on Brennan, so we can put that back. We get back to Anchornaut. Anchornaut has been destroyed. no further reactions to that, so our tokens go back to our pool. Anchornaut goes in the discard. Okay, and we're finally back to Meteor. Additionally, we've got a few tokens to clear up since that unit was destroyed. So at this point, we're back to resolving damage. Player says, alright, we'll just do the Emperor line, because that's going to be easy. So that damage is received, damage is dealt. There's no responses of any sort, and that doesn't trigger anything. End of story. So, moving on. Our intrepid Sir Snugglesworth says, okay, still my turn, I get to say who gets to resolve damage next. And they decide to resolve the Leech Warrior. Just for fun. So, Leech Warrior receives damage. I'm just going to put that up there because, of course, he has an ability. And we've already looked at this, but when he receives damage, we remove, darn focus, 1 die into the exhausted pool. Geralamy elects to do that and moves 1 of the die to the exhausted pool. Leech Warrior has received damage. The damage is actually dealt. There are no further reactions at this time. The Leech Warrior is destroyed. Alright, there is only 1 unit left with damage to resolve from Meteor, and then we can move on with our lives. Note that I'm leaving this die on the table. The reason for this is because it's a visual reminder that it's targeting something that is no longer in play, and we'll get to what happens with that in a minute. It's pretty obvious. So, anyway, Living Doll, time to resolve that damage, which, again, Living Doll has an ability that triggers on receiving damage, so we're going to adjust things like that. So, the Living Doll says, if I can get it. Whenever this unit receives damage, you may spend 1 basic to inflict X amount of damage to a target unit or Phoenix-born X being the damage received or the unit's life value, whichever is less. In this case, it's a damage of 2. Geralamy says, yeah, well, yes, I would like to trigger that, in fact. Moves 1 basic, pays the cost, chooses the target. The target is... oh, we'll just go with the Emperor line. It doesn't actually matter. So that was 2 damage that it's received, which is less than the unit's. However, this is an effect that targets something. We're triggering an ability, so we've paid our effect. We activated the ability, paid our costs, declared our targets. Here's the damage that's going to happen. However, Sir Snugglesworth has another trick up his sleeve, known as Choke. A reaction spell. You may play this spell when an opponent would use a unit or Phoenix-born ability that is not inexhaustible. Cancel the effects of that ability for the remainder of this turn. Now, this card is interesting because it has a keyword, and that word is would. Whenever a card in Ashes says that it triggers on something when something would happen, it means that it resolves first. So in this case, we're playing the card, so we need to pay our costs, declare our targets, which is not really applicable, but we're targeting the Living Doll's Pain Link. When something triggers when something else would happen, we place the card to the left in our matrix, because as I mentioned just a minute ago, would resolves first. So Choke resolves, canceling the effects of Pain Link. Those damage are not applicable. The Living Doll cannot use it, but the cost has already been paid, so we don't have to do anything else. The Living Doll's damage is dealt, does not result in destruction. Living Doll goes back home. At this point, Meteor has finally been fully resolved. So, we now take Meteor and put it where it says, which is the discard pile. Okay, our matrix is at last clear. Now, it doesn't really matter which order these things resolve in, because, as you're about to see, one of them has been negated. But Sir Snugglesworth says, just for fun, let's do Devotion first. So Devotion gets a slight preference, and it's moved above. Whenever something is overlapping something else, meaning that it triggers simultaneously, you have to make sure to move it above, because otherwise, if it's right to left, it means that it resolves dependent on the other, which is not true in this case. And that could matter, because if there were some reaction that we could play to devotion, which I'll give you a spoiler, there's not, then we would need to be able to place things to devotion's right. In any case, devotion resolves, it gets its exhaustion. Boy howdy, that was fun. Alright, it goes back here on our lion. And at long last, Royal Charm resolves. Unfortunately, Royal Charm's effect is placing a die on a card that's no longer in play. So, sadly, for Girolomine, that die remains in the exhausted pool, and Royal Charm returns to its spellboard. And at this point, our absolutely heinous adventure through effect resolution has been complete. Hopefully, this has been helpful in providing a way to think about how to visualize how effects resolve on the table in a concrete manner. Obviously, it's not something that I'd advise you do typically, but especially when you have a whole lot of effects resolving like this completely contrived example, it can be really handy to be able to see, okay, I need to resolve the thing on top, and then the thing on the bottom, and then this thing that triggered off of that thing on the bottom, and then this wood card which goes before it, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, and I will now sign off. Enjoy your games of ashes.